You don't have to die, Jack. She doesn't have to die.
Everybody dies, Sally. The thing is to die well.
Jack, that's not the survivor you promised me.
No, it's not. She said was, how can a man die better than facing fearful odds?
Get inside! Get inside!
The ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods.
I created you, Jack. I am your god.
Fuck you, Sally.
How can a man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? Simple, he can't. To give your life in the service of wisdom and against the archons is never to be forgotten, and that is to truly never die. And eternal life is always, always found in the womb of death. We're all mostly dead anyway, and in the battle for what is true and what is real is where we wake up to becoming fully alive.
Giving of yourself to something, or in being annihilated, actually, physically, to return, you might say, or to recognize. Life is always on the edge of death, always, and one should lack fear and have the courage of life. That's the principal initiation of all of the heroic stories.
And yes, that's from Scientology Tom's post-apocalyptic film, Oblivion, the fearless warrior theme appropriate for this week's episode. Oblivion is insanely Gnostic as well, from the demiurgic megabitch AI Sally to the crew's character realizing he's a construct living in a false reality, all to feed his mistress.
You won't get anything from me. My memory's been wiped to protect the
security of the mission. Yes. You can't have your precious memory falling into the wrong hands now, can you? Don't ask too many questions. Not part of the job description.
And in any simulation, it's all about being willing to die for a higher cause and following the call of your higher authentic self. As Philip K. Dick wrote, "The true measure of a man is not his intelligence or how high he rises in this freak establishment. No, the true measure of a man is this: how quickly can he respond to the needs of others and how much of himself he can give. No single thing abides, and all things are fucked up. A man is an angel that has gone deranged."
Do you have any memories before the mission? Before the security went?
Our job is not to remember. Remember?
Do you remember her?
Ready to pimp slap Sally and no longer be a deranged angel? Great, because you have arrived at Aeon Byte in these last days of human consciousness, in this age of Hermes, these Gnostic times, and this Philip K. Dick world. I hope you're ready to die to your old ignorant version and into something genuinely alive and loving, just as the crew's character does after ostensibly dying along with Sally in her womb of death floating above Earth.
To live is to risk it all. Otherwise, you're just an inert chunk of randomly assembled molecules drifting wherever the universe blows you. Oh, I'm sorry, Jerry.
For this noble quest, we have the aeonic pleasure of being joined at the virtual Alexandria by martial arts expert, Freemason, and seasoned esoteric researcher, Angel Millar. He will be discussing his new book, The Path of the Warrior Mystic, being a man in an age of chaos. Bigly, everyone is kung fu fighting gnosis, regardless of your gender. This sensibility reminds me of the Manichaean myth at the beginning of creation, where the primal man or the hermaphrodite or Adam Cadman must battle the kingdom of darkness, accepting he'll be torn to pieces and swallowed up, but knowing his essence will be the divine sparks scattered in matter that will eventually bring about the doom of the Archons.
Your powers are weak, old man.
You can't win, Darth. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
You have two paths to pick here at the end of the world. Which one will you choose? One path is the classical Gnostic, Astral Ninja, or Multiverse Marine. They were the heirs of the shamans and Egyptian mages who crossed the dangerous spheres of reality, searching for data and energy to level up their spirits and renew the tribe or kingdom. In short, the classical Gnostics, as well as the Neoplatonists and Hermeticists, went to war with the high places. They dared the various dimensions, avoiding or engaging magically with angels and archons and lost spirits, risking their sanity and souls, until they stood before the throne of ultimate consciousness and returned with the holy grail of Gnosis.
This is where we hold them! This is where we fight! This is where they die!
And they did it again and again, in the name of Sophia their queen and Hermes their cosmic jester. Again and again, Astral questing to the depths of hell and the highest spires of heaven, where Yaldabaoth tried his best to stop them. Again and again, they kept going. They died to their old selves and became higher than the gods, higher than Sally.
The world will know that free men stood against a tyrant, that few stood against many.
The path of being an astral ninja or multiverse marine is sometimes necessary. Heck and Hecate, this early autumn was hard on me for several personal and mental reasons. I struggled and felt myself being swallowed by the kingdom of darkness. But I went to war. I increased my meditation, my exercise, my holistic practices. Tenfold I did. I researched more and prayed harder. I scared myself by taking risks to remind myself that life, as always, is found in the womb of death, but also on the edges of danger. I went to battle, and if I lose in the end, at least I'll do it honorably. But I am no longer the person I was early in the fall, and that is good.
But there's that wonderful report of the Indians riding into the rain of bullets from Custer's men, and they're saying, it's a good day to die.
It's a great day to die. They're not hanging on.
The second path is that of the passive but untouchable mystic ranger, who stands under the storm with the armor of eternity and the shield of the kind heart. Non-attachment is winning, and inner peace is the gaining of the Holy Grail. As Ali ibn Abi Talib said, detachment is not that you should own nothing, but that nothing should own you.
Things you own end up owning you.
Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose.
Or as the Gospel of Thomas says, become a passerby. And as the Sufis say, life is a bridge to cross and not build upon. Lastly, I like this saying from the Islamic Jesus. Christ passed by a group of people who hurled insults at him, and he responded with blessings. He passed by a group of people who hurled insults at him, and he responded likewise. One of his disciples asked, "Why is that the more they insult you, the more you bless them, as if inviting this upon yourself?" Christ said, "A person can bring forth only what is within him."
If we have souls, they are made of the love we share, undimmed by time, unbound by death.
So which one should you be? Which path should you take? An astral ninja or multiverse marine who embraces the saying, "Do no harm, but take no shit"? Or be an untouchable mystic ranger with so much wonder to bring forth? I say both, for you have both within you. How do you know which one to be at certain times? That's where wisdom comes in, for ultimately, we are in a war against the collapsing of creation into complete ignorance. Adjust your Ragnarok jockstrap accordingly.
What happened to the warriors at Thermopylae?
Dead to the last man.
Trust me, what you have within you, what you forgot was within you before Sally sank you into oblivion, is infinite, beautiful, and ultimately hazardous to any wickedness in high places. And it may seem all crazy. How crazy? Well, one of my favorite warrior stories is that of Marine engineer Tsutomu Yamaguchi in World War II. He was on a mission at Hiroshima the day the bomb fell, and he survived. Despite his wounds and trauma, he held on to his duty and returned to his hometown the following morning. Guess where he lived? Fucking Nagasaki.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
While his superior was berating him for making up a nonsense story about a bomb powerful enough to destroy an entire city, the second bomb landed on his ass. And you know what? He survived that one too. How in Odin's dingleberries does someone survive 2 atomic bombs? 2! I don't know, but I know if Tsutomu can overcome the hellfire of the establishment, the cruelty of fortune and fate, with honor and acceptance, so can we. And so is the providence of Sophia when all seems lost and nothing seems to make sense.
It's said that the worst thing to come out of Pandora's box were not the sorrows or the plagues. It was hope itself. Hope's a gamble. Hope lacks certainty.
Now comes the biggest fight of your existences. Let us find those tools and weapons with Angel Millar. There were a couple of weird background sounds during the interview, but that's life in podcasting, and they were temporal. Maybe it was Sally and her archons, who knows? Regardless, amazing chat. But first, don't let fear be the mind killer, and embrace life as you do death.
Silence.
Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings obliteration. And I'll face my fear and I'll permit it to pass over me, Mr. Johnny. And when it has compass. Oh, don't be bright, it's both. Where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Let go! Keep her! Only I will remain.
mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience. A process that cannot be understood by stopping it. We must move with the flow of the process. We must join it. We must flow with it.
This is the Aeon Byte interview, and with us we have the pleasure of being joined by Angel Millar to discuss his book, The Path of the Warrior Mystic, Being a Man in an Age of Chaos. And we would also like to touch upon the book that came out last year, which is also very good. I read both books, and the second book, the earlier book, is The 3 Stages of Initiatic Spirituality. Angel, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure is all ours, and always a pleasure to have the Moondog Vance. Vance, how you doing?
Oh, I'm fine this sunny morning in California. Looking forward to seeing what it is to be a warrior mystic.
We shall find out. So, Angel, why don't we start there? What is, you might say, the thesis of your book, The Path of the Warrior Mystic?
Yeah. So really, it's a journey of spiritual maturation, you could say, and of acting in the world towards one's higher self, but drawing specifically on the warrior and the mystic. So the path actually starts out with the warrior and a discussion of chivalry and of the physical body, but ends with the mystic. And I'm using the term mystic in 2 senses from the British historian Arnold Toynbee. And he and I are using this term to mean both the sort of mystic, the prophet who receives a revelation and then goes into society and transforms it, as well as the creator, or the creator who transforms society in a certain way. So you could think of the mystic in one sense of being someone like the Prophet Muhammad, but you could also think as well of someone like Picasso, who transforms our way of thinking through his artistic genres, and then bringing these together. And classically speaking, the higher type of warrior in probably every civilization brought together both the arts of war and the arts of peace. So the spear, wrestling, the sword in particular, of course, charioteering, archery, but also calligraphy, painting, poetry, most especially, and other arts as well in one person.
Yeah, it's like I said, I enjoyed your book, and I think this sort of lost warrior archetype is more needed than ever, especially for the male sex that it seems very lost on his position and what he should do in this society. I was, Angel, reminded of the movie The Last Samurai. Have you watched it?
I haven't, but I know which movie you're referring to.
Yeah, and I know the movie gets criticized for the white savior trope, right. But I say for those of you getting all offended that historically there were Westerners that fought alongside the samurai in Japan, and I like movies where we focus on the culture and you don't have to do all this changing. But there was a time when, if you wanted to do a big historical movie, if you wanted seats in the theater, you had to sort of shoehorn in someone like Tom Cruise or Arnold Schwarzenegger or Denzel Washington or even Jackie Chan. It's just the way Hollywood was, and it's another era. But anyway, beyond this speech, I think of Lord Katsamuro in the movie, and he really embodies this because he's a bloodthirsty samurai, but he's also a philosopher. He meditates, he does poetry, he likes to be an actor in plays. So he sort of, you would say, embodies what you're talking about, someone who is both violence and art.
Yeah, that's right. And the Japanese actually have a term for it, bumbu ryodo, And it means the way of essentially the way of civilization, or the way of arts, or the way of literature and the martial arts together as one. But you find this elsewhere as well, of course. Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, said that education should be through music, wrestling, and philosophy. Yeah, and even reflecting the figure you just mentioned, among the Vikings, there was Egil Skallagrimsson, who was known as a particularly bloodthirsty warrior, but was also renowned as a poet. And he was actually the first person in Norse poetry to use end rhyme rather than rhyming at the beginning of the sentence. So, revolutionary in poetry as well as a bloodthirsty warrior as well. So.
Yeah, and even the Knights Templar, they were vicious fighters, but they were very pious monks at the same time. They lived in both worlds, right? Life and death, spirit and matter.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the other element with this combination of the hard and soft arts. Behind it, there's always some kind of a religion or spirituality. Obviously, with the samurai, that would be Zen Buddhism. But with the Crusader Knights as well, you have a figure like Richard the Lionheart, who is renowned for his interest in poetry and in culture in general. And he's supposed to have invited musicians from Saladin's camp, the enemy camp, to come and play Arabic music for him, which he is also supposed to have loved as well. So there is this kind of ability with the warrior to appreciate even the civilization that it is ostensibly fighting, because there's this higher element to the warrior, which is different to the mercenary or the soldier or the modern individual in general, where we cannot appreciate things of other cultures. Or maybe we appreciate them without appreciating our own as well, and kind of fetishize the other culture. But with the warrior, you have this genuine appreciation.
Oh, agreed. And I think that's something also men almost need to learn. I think women are the stargate of life and death. And as the ancients knew, life is really found in the womb of death. And it's a dichotomy to be a whole person. That's where it's found, the truth, eternal life and all that. And I always there's a story of a samurai, and I've said this before on the show, Angel. And there's a samurai, he meets another soldier or somebody on the road, and they get into an argument, and they're going to fight. And the other person spits in the samurai's face, and the samurai walks off. And the people reading the story is like, oh, what a coward. But what happened is, according to the code, he could not fight out of emotion. He couldn't strike somebody down with anger. It had to be just honor or what was going on. So he had to go and meditate until his anger subsided and then go fight the guy.
Yeah, that actual story is in Islamic tradition as well.
Oh,
the
really?
same story is said about Ali. Yeah, and I think actually that might be the origin of that samurai story. Yeah.
So they had a code too, even in Islam, a very stern code to be a warrior.
Yeah, so Islamic chivalry is called futawa, which translates literally as young manhood, but it's generally translated as chivalry. But yeah, there's a code which is similar to other forms of chivalry as well. And again, there you also find the idea of learning both the soft arts and the hard arts as well. So.
I also really, when watching that movie, I also thought of again, how ideas come to you. And ironically, I was in Portland doing a presentation at the Freemason Hall, and you've done a presentation there too, I was told, at the Scottish Rite in downtown Portland. And I was at the hotel, and I turned on the TV, and there was this movie, Mel Gibson movie, Hacksaw Ridge. And I was like, oh, this is okay. It's kind of cool about this Christian guy that wouldn't fight in the war because of his beliefs. But the part that got me all excited was when the Japanese are finally being defeated. You have a shot of the Japanese colonel or general doing the harikiri. Yeah. And I got really emotional. I was like, what? And in my head, I was like, this is a true man. And I'm like, and I'm questioning, wait, he's killing. And then I realized it's almost the ultimate form of honor for a man to give his life for something greater. And also that even when you are disgraced, when this general was disgraced because he was losing to the Americans, that you can salvage your life, your honor, and your soul by simply dying.
Right. Yeah.
So it's interesting how, so you might say the male mind works, but it has to be learned, don't you think?
Yeah, to some degree, yeah. Although I think it is in the nature of men and young men to sort of fantasize about a death in battle as well. So I think that's probably actually quite a common thing. But the idea of actually going through with it, yeah, I think that takes some conditioning.
Yeah, and your book has a lot of really great advice on how to become a warrior mystic and what needs to be done. And you draw in from all these traditions. It's a very rich journey across the world, across philosophy, across history. And maybe you could share some advice, especially because men need it more than ever today. But what I caught in your book was the idea of before you go into battle with the world or your career or whatever, you have to kill your inner critic, right? And you even call it's the main demon that takes us down.
Yeah, that's right. The inner critic and the inner victim. And of course, today, there's a great appeal for us to be victims and a great appeal for us to criticize. And really, the critics are held up, in a sense, as modern heroes, those who criticize, particularly in the world of politics. Or can criticize art from a political perspective, or anything from a political perspective, are considered to be the sort of intellectual heroes of our society, even though they actually contribute nothing to our society ultimately, and will eventually be forgotten. Previously, people found their worth in contributing to society and in creativity. And, of course, at one point, if you went back far enough, even things like hearing music, people would sing songs. They weren't able to listen to pre-recorded music. There was nothing to play them on, or making food or whatever it may be. So people were, in a sense, much more creatively engaged, or passing along stories from one generation to the next. And today, I think, especially with the very manipulative settings on those algorithms, we are very much being turned into these critics who criticize all the time, and end up spending, or a lot of people end up spending their lives criticizing. And G.I. Gurdjieff said that the people would give up their happiness before they would give up their suffering. And it seems like a weird thing. Like, why would that be? Can that even be right? And I think most people would say that's actually ridiculous. But of course, you can see that in the angry religious zealot, or the angry political fanatic, who might live quite a comfortable life actually, but they would rather give up their happiness and be angry than give up their suffering, which they exaggerate often. And certainly we have to kill this inner critic, this inner victim, and begin to focus on what we can do.
Yeah, it reminds me, I forget the name of the author. He wrote True Believer. He said, a zealot. Yeah, what's his name? Oh my God, I was just reading his book last week, but he said, a zealot is not afraid of persecution, but he's afraid of freedom.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's really the big takeaway of that book, that it's a kind of escape from freedom, and this trying to submerge oneself in the mass to kind of escape personal responsibility, which is very much indicative of our own age in a certain sense.
Indeed, well said. And where is he? What was the name of it? Eric Hoffer, of course, for those of you. The book is still, it's a timeless book, even though it came out right after World War II, but it really helps you understand mass movements and authoritarian psychologies and all that. A brilliant book. But how would you say are some of the ways to kill your inner critic or understand it? Or I guess if we associate the inner critic with Jung's shadow, integrate it, or what's some advice for people? Because I still go through it. I'm you know, 1,000 times better, but something goes south and I am like carrying my cross across the house in front of my children. Woe is me. It's not going to work out. Fuck it all.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to withdraw from other people who are critics and criticizers, and especially from people online, and not getting involved in those discussions with people. If that's how they want to spend their lives, then that's too bad for them. But we definitely need to detach ourselves from that and realize that, you know, people aren't online because they want to be engaged in a reasonable discussion. They're there to win, and they're there to look good. And if you correct them, even, you know, legitimately, they're going to take offense because you're criticizing their identity. And it's really about identity. It's a new fashion now that fashion is dead. So we have to remove ourselves from that sort of situation and not get sucked into these productiveless activities online. And then we need to focus on some kind of thing that we are aiming towards. So whether that's a martial art or learning yoga or learning some kind of skill, and really pursuing that to the best of our ability and with diligence, routinely, preferably several times a week, if not every day to some degree. And then I would say, you know, beyond that, you have to kind of look around at different cultures or different cultural phenomena. And, you know, with the higher type of warrior, I think we were saying earlier, you find this union of the hard and the soft arts. And, you know, in the late samurai manual, the Hagakure, I paraphrase slightly, but it says, you know, if once you mastered a way, when you come into contact with other ways, you should be more and more in accord with your own. And so you find someone who practices the way of the sword, becoming a master calligrapher or a master painter, or studying the tea ceremony, or whatever it may be, and learning more about the sword as a result. And so we have to pursue something very deeply while able to look at other arts, even things that are very different to our own, and seeing how it relates to our own in terms of the principles.
And you've certainly, as they say, you eat your own dog food. You have done all of these things. You're a
Right.
Freemason. You practice kung fu, hypnotism. You've actually done everything and found your own path. Angel's unique path.
Yeah, and I also studied fine art under a pretty successful painter a few decades ago as well. So you know, on the one hand, it's all historically accurate, but I also draw from my own experience, or maybe filter it through my own experience as well. So hopefully, I'm living a life that resembles this sort of classical higher ideal, at least to a certain degree, to the best of my ability, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And another point of your book, and a very important point and very relevant to our days, is that we have become too focused on safety, and that's just not reality. And there's a quote in your book, and I wrote it down and I actually put it on my wall as a reminder, Angel. And you write, "Though we may live to see the black hole of a dystopian future, we must face the fact that there will never be a utopia on Earth." Brilliant.
Right. Yeah, no, there were not. And in regard to safety, there's really the founder of sociology, Ibn Khaldun, who I believe lived in around the 16th century, if I'm getting my dates correct. He was born in Tunis. And he observed many different dynasties rising and falling throughout his life. And he came to the conclusion that dynasties move through 3 generations, or what we could just call 3 stages. And he says in the first stage, a warrior band will swoop down on a senescent dynasty that is ripe for the picking and will take it over. But they won't live in luxury. They'll still sleep on the floor. They don't really like luxury. They kind of push it away, but they've taken over the dynasty, and they retain these sort of desert values, or what Americans might call the frontier values. And then in the second generation, they admire the warrior values, the desert values, and they secretly wish for their return, but they also enjoy luxury, even though they can kind of see that it's an illusion. And then in the final stage, the people are only really interested in their own safety and in luxury. And at that point, a new warrior band will swoop down, according to Ibn Khaldun, and take over the dynasty and will reinitiate this cycle all over again. And certainly, I think that a preoccupation with safety is an inclination that a civilization is drawing to a close, or if not a civilization, then an era. And I think we have to respond to that either by creating something new, or accepting what may possibly come. And I would suggest creating something new might be better, but drawing on timeless principles, hopefully.
It reminds me of a saying I've seen a lot lately on the internet that goes, strong men create good societies create weak men create bad societies create strong men. Kind of right. A similar cycle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think Ibn Khaldun would probably agree with that, actually.
He'd have a meme on his computer.
Yeah, right? He would, yeah.
Yeah, well, here we are. What cycle are we at today? What do you think he would say?
Oh, I would definitely say we're in the final cycle.
Kali Yuga all the way, baby.
Yeah, it's very much like the Kali Yuga, but on a much smaller scale in time-wise, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and beyond, and going back also to advice on the warrior too, I think another great advice, and I think this needs to be always hammered with people, is don't compare yourself to anybody. There's only one path for Angel or Miguel or Vance, right? And that's a hard one, especially on the internet when you see all these people that pretend to have good lives.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. And much of it is pretending, of course. And the internet is not reality. Reality is what you do in your life and who you become and what you pursue. And and obviously there will be overlap between one life and the next, or, one person who practices yoga or martial arts and the next. But ultimately, we're all going to have to find our own way in this time where there are not very many clear roadmaps.
Well said. I agree with that too. Now going back to where we are today and the situation and how your book helps rectify it, you write that, and especially with what has happened in 2020 and 2021, is fear. Fear and anxiety have settled across the globe. And you write that basically on fear, that life is always, quote, thinly veiled chaos. So you think that fear is us not wanting to, especially men, embrace the chaos, the unknown.
Yeah, well, it's definitely that. Most people do not want to acknowledge that life is chaos. Most people think that life can be managed, especially through large corporations and big governments, and that we will then be safe if they get in control and tell us what to do. History tells us that we're probably less safe than ever, but I think in a way it's more to it than that. In the past, people viewed the world through the lens of faith, and today people view the world through the lens of fear. And fear, in a sense, is a new type of faith. And we see a lot of people online who are constantly afraid, and they say, "I was offended by that," or "I felt afraid. I felt afraid by that." or I felt threatened. And of course, the question we should always ask is, well, was that a reasonable response? Was there a reason to feel afraid? And obviously there's not, but fear has become this sort of magic thing where if I feel afraid, I'm justified in whatever I do, but also I'm going to see the world through the lens of fear, and then the world will make sense to me. And as I say, in the past, people viewed the world through the lens of faith, and doing that, they would ask, well, does it make sense to me now? And, there's a Christian saying, and I'm not a Christian by any stretch of the imagination, but, the Bible says, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And today we think, oh my goodness, that is an incredibly oppressive statement. And it really depends on, of course, what situation you're in, whether that's an oppressive statement or a liberating statement. And sure, today, if you're laying on your couch munching on Cheetos every night, it's oppressive, because why would you want to fear the Lord? You already, got everything you want. Right. So you don't want to fear the Lord. But what if you're in battle and you're facing 100 opponents? Well, then it's going to be a great thing to fear the Lord, because you won't fear your enemy, right? It takes that away. That's the point. But ultimately that comes back to faith. You have faith in God. And today fear is our lens to see everything through, but it doesn't take us out of ourselves. It makes us less capable of acting, not more capable of acting.
Oh, yeah. And I get the takeaway from your book and your advice is fear is wanting to control, to stay with the normal. I was thinking, the normal that we have is this sort of left brain, rational, logical world where the roads are nice, the train is on time, I get to work out every day at 8 a.m, and life is just normal. But Angel, that's not reality. That's maybe half of reality, because there is, as you write, there is chaos. There's the lunar powers. There's the artistic, the divine feminine. There is all that. And we've sort of denied it and robbed ourselves of so much wholeness because of it. You always wonder, I'm getting poetic here. You wonder, well, maybe that's what this virus did. It reminded us that there is chaos in nature and we better pay attention.
Yeah, I think that's actually very true. I think a lot of people have woken up over the last year and thought, well, why am I investing myself in this job that I don't really like, to live in an apartment that's got noisy neighbors all around it? And I don't know anyone in the apartment block anyway, or anyone on my street, and I'm isolated. What's the big deal with this? And I think, that's made people really realize there might be other things to life. Americans are quite isolated in a way. And yeah, so I think that's had a shock. But certainly chaos is always ready to loom. And the 20th century had plenty of chaos in it. The 2 world wars, plus other wars like Korea, Vietnam, and so on. And so you can see why people might want to get away from chaos. And I think for the generation or two older than me, they were, in a sense, especially I grew up in Britain, I live in the US now, but my parents or grandparents' generations really wanted to focus on the material, because their country had been pretty much devastated. There were cities that were, bombed to rubble. And, if you're a returning soldier from war and you don't know where your street is because it's rubble and all the streets around it are rubble, you're not going back to your American white picket fence. You're going back to a bomb crater, and that's your home. And you can see why people would want to have a sort of more conservative, a focused world, focusing on let's make money, let's get material wealth. And obviously at a certain point, and I think the 1960s would be that began to break down. People thought that, well, that's kind of soulless, and we're more interested in spirituality. And there is a desire for safety and a desire for predictability today. I think there's less curiosity than the 1960s, but Yeah, ultimately, we don't really know what's coming down the track, and it's difficult to predict, really. No one could have predicted COVID, and I think it will get more chaotic in the future.
Oh, I agree. And it sometimes breaks my heart because I talk to family members and the fear, and I realize and I get what the fear is. You're really not afraid of the disease. You're afraid that we're not going to go back to 2019. And I want to tell them we're not going back. And I know it's hard to look ahead, but we can make a different world, right, Angel? We can a different career, different life, a different psyche of men. Like you said, what happened in the 60s, or even as some have said, after the Black Death, we got the Renaissance. After the Spanish flu, we got the Roaring Twenties. So good things can come about.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. These sort of chaotic reminders can shake people up and make them focus more on what's important. But I think, this idea of making a new world can also make people nervous because it can feel like, do they mean some sort of communist takeover and we're all going to be put in camps? But certainly, as you say, if we're going to make a better world, I think it's going to be something that people have to do individually, one person at a time. And I think that could be a very positive thing. And certainly we should all be thinking about making changes in our lives at this time. And hopefully that will be one good thing that does come out of this last year and a bit.
Yeah, I hope so as well. And I think one technique you give in your book is that of contemplating death. Again, that's where life is, and that's where you find peace in life. What techniques do you use, or some traditions that you really admire use to, like the Gnostics said, not taste death?
Yeah. So, well, as you know, and that's why I'm a Freemason, and in Freemasonry, there's quite a lot of focus on mortality and death. Not in the one I went through, but in some lodges, and this is increasing now over the last 10 years. They will often have a chamber of reflection where there's a black room with a skull and crossbones in it, and you go and meditate on your death. And I've certainly been in several of those, but certainly just really thinking about my death on maybe not on a daily basis, but certainly very, very frequently, or maybe even on a daily basis, and thinking about what I want to do with the rest of my life, however long or short it may be. But certainly there are no guarantees. But it's certainly something to fix in the mind that we're not immortal and that we have a finite amount of time on this earth.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, you can find it in different traditions. For example, the Tibetan Buddhists are told to meditate not only on their death, but do it in a cemetery.
That's right. Yeah.
So it happens a lot. And of course, you've got the famous Hamlet holding the skull. He's contemplating his death. It's in so many traditions, in the mystery religions.
That's
I'm sure you know, they would do the ritual and they would walk out. And they wouldn't say what happened, but they would say, "We no longer fear death."
Right. Yeah. And even there's a Catholic monk Catholic nun rather, who's revived the practice of memento mori, meditating on death within Catholicism, which was around during the Black Death. And I don't know if this interests you, but even in some old paintings, I think from the 18th century, maybe 17th century or 16th, when somebody would have a portrait painted and they would be an aristocrat or a prince or a nobleman of some sort, they would often have a skull or skull and crossbones painted on the reverse, which you could never see, but it was a reminder this person will die or I will die. So yeah, it's curious.
Yeah, it's an important thing. And Vance, what do you think, or do you have a question? Or are you dressing up as a samurai to go out and fight? The Shogun. Richard Chamberlain. Remember Shogun? Great series.
Oh, yeah. And we just had some person confront the house as you were speaking and wanting to do something to our lawn. You know, one of these guys that goes around trying to sell you stuff. So the fears of modern society from door-to-door salesmen.
Oh my God.
But getting back to the more serious, I'm sitting here struggling with the concept of warrior and the fact that, warriors have to commit violence to protect things. But the first question I would have, doesn't a warrior in the violent phase of a warrior, doesn't a warrior exist to protect the status quo, to protect normalcy, to counteract chaos, in the form of other people invading the particular area and so forth?
Yes. Well, generally that is the case. Yeah. So generally warriors, sometimes they may be taking over other people's land, but often they are protecting their own culture from invasion as well. So they are trying to prevent chaos. That is true.
Yeah. So does the mystic warrior, refrain from conquests and so forth because of the principles that they adhere to? And what happens? What happens when a society is starving and the guys next door have what they need to? What the first society that's starving needs to survive? Is what's about the ethics?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if that would exactly be the case, but probably land would be affected much the same way if they're that close. But in terms of historical warriors fought no matter how good they were at calligraphy or higher arts as well, and killed people. And, Miyamoto Musashi may have been renowned for his poetry and his calligraphy, painting, also for landscape gardening, but he was a warrior at the end of the day who killed people. So, it's definitely an element. And, I think, to be perfectly blunt, we should know how to defend ourselves, and hopefully we will never have to use it. But there's nothing wrong with defending yourself if someone attacks you. It's actually Absolutely a good idea. And in the West, and I think spiritual people in particular have this sort of Jesus complex where they say, "Oh no, I could never defend myself, and I'll just let that person beat me up, and it will be a good spiritual lesson." No, it won't. What they will learn is they can victimize people and get away with it. So you won't be teaching them anything except to do more of it. So, sometimes we have to do things that are hard, but defending ourselves, I think that's something that everybody should be equipped to do. And I certainly recommend that men and women learn some sort of self-defense.
Yeah, agreed.
Or like me, I have 3 trained pit bulls. So they do my, so that's, there you go.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Vance?
Well, I was also wondering about the spiritual side of warriors. I mean, we haven't talked about that too much at this point, but the definition of mystic that you gave didn't tell me about how warriors conceive of, or is it even necessary to conceive of the higher worlds, let's say, the greater realities beyond the material.
Yeah, well, I think it is. Yeah. And certainly if you look at different warrior traditions, such as Shaolin monks or Kalari Payat in India or Zircana in Iran, definitely you find that the otherworldly, the spiritual deity, these are all integral to these traditions. And if you look at the Shaolin temple, for example, they have the Shaolin guardian deity Vajrapani, with all kinds of myths around him. Noticeably, he carries, instead of carrying the usual Vajra, he carries a wooden staff, which was one of the favored weapons of the monk. And so there's this kind of union of Vajrapani and the monk. In Kalari Payat in India, there's always a 7-storied altar with a statue of Kali at the top of the altar. In those Kalari Payat dojos where they are Hindu, there are some Muslim ones. And in Zircana in Iran, or Persia, as it may also have been called previously, the Zircana gymnasium is modeled on the Sufi temple And the performances are much like a Sufi performance with drumming and singing. There's always a picture of Ali on the wall. Ali was the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad and the first convert to Islam. And he's also regarded to be the perfect warrior. And also, especially in Shia Islam, he's also regarded as bringing the esoteric knowledge of the Quran. And it should be stressed that they don't mean that Muhammad didn't know the esoteric form, but that Muhammad brought the exoteric, and then Ali brought the esoteric form. So he's also regarded as the perfect mystic as well. And maybe, although it's just a detail, it should probably be mentioned that even when they are doing repetitions of particular exercises during a performance, the counting has a spiritual connotation. So instead of saying one, they will say God is one. Instead of saying two, they will say God is not two. And so you have all these Islamic references in each number as well.
And it should be mentioned too, for the record, and I'm going back to The Last Samurai, when it played in Japan, the Japanese were like, okay, you guys did a good job, but you're kind of putting on a pedestal the samurai. And you're not talking about how there were plenty of corrupt, materialistic samurai who were greedy. Same with knights. Yeah. There were plenty of corrupt knights. Same. So this is not, we're not putting them on a pedestal like that every knight or samurai is going to help feed the poor or anything like that. They're human and they fail.
Well, and not only that, I think, even today, we can see that even in corporations, there are people who act responsibly and people who try and work the system and who are psychopaths. And I'm sure that...
Or look at our military, corrupt generals all over the place.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure that there have always been psychopaths and they've always got into high positions. So unfortunately, that just might be the reality of human nature. But certainly not every knight or warrior has embodied that, embodied the highest ideals at all. Some of them were total psychopaths, obviously. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And going back to the point about men and women, and I think I saw that on your book too. You sparked this idea and made me think about this. You made me think about a lot, Angel. But you wrote about how we're wired differently, men and women, but how as a woman gives birth, so a man must suffer in his vocation. In other words, we have to learn. Again, the women are the portal of life and death, and they know this instinctually. We men, it's almost we have to be, we have to be initiated. And you talk about some really intense ones, like the Maori tribes doing circumcision with anesthesia and other things like that. So we men need to sort of learn about death and life.
Yeah. Well, one thing we need to do, I think, is be initiated into manhood, because, when a girl becomes a woman and starts menstruating, she usually menstruates with the other women at the same time, and they are in sync with the lunar cycle as well. And so it's very obvious for a woman that she's become a woman, that she's accepted into the company of women, and somehow women are also linked to nature at the same time. And, I know that we feel we can have any kind of body we want these days, but if we're speaking honestly and openly, if I look back and think of my first relationship when I was 16, I can definitely say that she had a woman's body, but I would not say that I had a man's body, not by any stretch of the imagination. And I think for men, that we have to be initiated into manhood, but we also have to create our own body as well. And that's part of the process. And it's a difficult one, and it requires some kind of suffering within an initiatic tradition, whether that's a martial tradition or something else.
And you feel maybe men have lost it in modern times, that they should try to seek these initiatory systems, whether it's Taekwondo or Freemason or anything?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it's very important to be around men. Obviously, martial arts, so women practice martial arts as well, so it's not exclusively male. But, it's important for men and young men in particular to have good role models. And I think we all know as men that that's actually quite difficult to find unless you go out of your way and join something like a martial arts group or a fraternity or something along those lines. It's important to have a role model. It's important to model yourself after people who are more ethical, more evolved, more secure in themselves, and who have achieved things in life for sure. Yeah. And hopefully there can be some kind of actual initiation, as there have been for thousands of years for men.
Agreed, and definitely agreed. And one of the central themes or stories in your book, Angel, is that of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And
yeah.
Great. Have you watched the recent movie? I have not.
I haven't seen it yet. No, I'm not sure if I might be disappointed by it. But
really? Have you seen it, Vance?
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay. I've mixed reviews from people, but it seems worth a watch. I mean, why not? But yeah, the story really encompasses the situation, and it's a timeless tale, Angel. And
yeah,
it strikes me as you write. It starts out with there's Sir Gawain and the Knights of the Round Table, and what is that? That is normalcy. That is law. That is left brain thinking. Everything's organized. Everything's great. Everything's putting along, and people have food on the table. And then suddenly the Green Knight walks in, and he's basically the great symbol of chaos and nature who's going to disrupt everything.
Right, exactly. And so the story continues that the Green Knight offers a challenge to all of the knights in the court and says, you can chop off my head with my axe so long as I can do the same to you next year, which seems quite a weird bargain to strike. And they are quite nervous of this green, very tall, strange knight. But finally, Gawain accepts the challenge. And after his head is chopped off, the Green Knight picks up his head and holds it up and says, "You find me at the Green Chapel a year from now." And then, of course, Gawain is plunged into this world that is beyond good and evil, out in nature, where there's just wild animals and occasional bandits, and finally comes across a castle where he resides for a short time before proceeding to the chapel. And there again, you find all these strange encounters, a strange hunt that is going on that seems to reflect things that Gawain is doing in the castle. It's quite a myth with all kinds of ancient lore, I would say, that is actually in there, maybe rather subtly, including the wild hunt, of course.
Yeah, and at the end, the knight spares him. And basically because he held on to, what would you say is the takeaway of this story that we could learn and be like Sir Gawain? He even in the chaos, he keeps his honor and he keeps who he is to himself.
Yeah.
He holds on to it.
That's right. So when he's in the castle, the lady of the castle tries to seduce him over several nights, and he refuses. And of course, he's, as far as he knows, he's going to die in a few days' time anyway. And I think many men would have thought, well, why not? But he
with a bang.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but he refuses to do that, and the king, I guess, the husband of the lady, is out hunting during the day while the lady is trying to seduce him, and noticeably the animals that are killed seem to reflect Gawain's actions. So when finally he accepts to take a green magical belt from her to protect him, so on that occasion a fox is killed because the fox is cunning and devious, and he's acted in a devious way and wants to use cunning. But in the end, he is forgiven that and only given a slight nick on his neck for being for giving in to that kind of behavior. But because he didn't give in to his other desires, he is spared death. And it turns out that the The Green Knight is actually the castle king or lord, so in disguise.
Yeah, so that's you would say that we should all be Gawain in some way or another. We all are in this age of this pandemic.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I think going out into the world and going out into the unknown is definitely important for sure. And trying to live by some kind of code as well, which is not easy, and refraining from just giving in to whatever comes along, and no matter how tempting it might appear.
There are certainly a lot of temptations today, everywhere. That's how the world is built to tempt us. I mean,
that's right.
Ancient times and today, it's all, and I know this is, it's the Gnostic attitude. The whole world is coded to tempt you. And there's a saying I have, recently that I really like, and I keep using it from, Franz Kafka, and it goes, evil is anything that distracts.
Right. Yeah.
So, and there is a lot of distractions. I also really like, Angel, your chapter on the mechanical world versus the primordial world. Could you summarize that briefly? It's a great chapter. All your chapters are great, but this one really struck me.
Thank you. Yeah, essentially, it looks at the difference between the primordial world and the modern world. And the primary difference being that in the modern world, we dissect everything and we look at things as they are dissected. And one example I use is the painter John Constable, who's a British painter. And if you look at his paintings today, you think, oh, these are quite boring, conservative paintings of landscape with clouds. He was mostly known for his clouds. And but he was actually very radical. And what made him radical was that he was the first person to really study clouds, and he actually would hang out with meteorologists trying to learn about meteorology. And if you look at painting before that, often you find that the figures are beautifully painted, very realistic, and then there will be these fluffy cotton wool clouds that are completely unrealistic in the sky. And so so he introduced this new element, but what he also did at the same time was rob it of its majesty in a way that he emptied the sky of all the gods and deities and goddesses that were up there. Because before, if you look at Titian, there are all these strange angelic beings that are up there on those cotton wool clouds. and now we and of course, with industrialization, you have this emptying out of the mystery in the world, but you could still look up in the sky and think there's God. But Constable essentially took that away, said, no, it's all just sort of factual, really. And so we live in this sort of factual, mechanical world where we're interested in dissecting everything. Another painting I talk about is René Magritte's, I forget the actual title, but it has a painting of a pipe, and it says, this is not a pipe on it. And, what Magritte, I think, effectively did at that point without realizing it is, he says the pipe is not a pipe, or the pipe is not a real pipe, but the words are real words. And we kind of enter into a world at that point where words are more real than real life. And I think that this is something we definitely see online in particular, where people mistake what is said as reality, and reality is kind of a simulacrum. And somehow we have to get back to the primordial world, the world of meaning, nature, and our own physical bodies, I think.
For the audience, Angel, and of course, as I always say, I will have this on the show notes. But for those who are listening in audio only, where can they find out more about you and get your books and so forth?
Sure. So my books, the Path of the Warrior Mystic and the 3 Stages of Initiatic Spirituality, are both available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, and probably most other booksellers online, at least, and pretty much every major bookstore, and including in other countries as well, like Great Britain. But if they want to find out more about me or hypnosis or anything like that, then they can go to my website, and that's angelmillar.com, ANGELMILLAR.com.
And you offer hypnotism services for your clients. If somebody wants it, they can find you there.
Yeah, hypnosis and mentoring, sure.
Well, very cool. Well, for the audience, I definitely highly recommend you get these 2 books because we need that stuff in this age of Hermes, as I call it. But we are at least at the end of the interview, even though this Kali Yuga will just keep on trucking. But Vance, thanks for keeping us company. And I hope when you go to the zoo, you don't disturb any gorillas.
For sure I won't. Yeah, there's so much food for thought and self-examination here. I think it was very fascinating. So thank you, Angel.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, Angel, it's been a great conversation. Good luck with all your projects. Thanks for your time, and we look forward to our next chat.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great, and I very much enjoyed your show over the years, so it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, have a good rest of your day.
Likewise.
And there you have it, you veterans of 1,000 psychic wars. Angel bringing out daemons and demons to fight the good fight and finish the race that is finding your true self. In our second part, Angel will also share insights from his previous book, The 3 Stages of Initiatic Spirituality, which includes a very excellent Gnostic initiation exercise. He'll talk more on the way of the warrior mystic, including its embracing sometimes of peaceful methods, as well as why ancestor worship is so important. Angel will share which military leaders in history inspire him. You know we'll talk about Marcus Aurelius. And he'll talk about how actually the right persona is critical in finding who you truly are. And we'll get a bit into hypnotism as a form of meditation. And for some reason, the male orgasm or petite mort. And much more. So please support for the full warrior way. And it does help grow this Red Pill cafeteria. Only $6.99 a lunar cycle, or whatever you want to pledge on Patreon. You can now subscribe to the easy-to-use private RSS feed from Red Circle. No matter where you subscribe, it will cost you about $1 per episode, and that's a deal of many lifetimes. Membership to AB Prime or Patreon mid-levels includes full access to more than 500 quality shows. You'll also get an invitation to the Inner Sanctum of Gnosis Facebook group and my Discord channel. Even support in the form of some shekel donations to PayPal or the US mail really helps. There is also a link on the show notes if you want to donate via Stripe now. And I also have the merch store and an Amazon wish list. The Finding Hermes program is going strong, and so are our virtual Alexandria exclusive private meetings that include exercises loyal to the ancient Gnostics and a monthly Q&A. If you want to understand and experience Gnosticism in its full impact and liberating secrets, become an official citizen of the virtual Alexandria. I've recently done presentations on Abraxas, the Jungian inner journey, the secrets of the serpent Gnostics, and why we live in Gnostic times, and much more. Whew! I know that's a lot, but I gotta stay spread out as I dodge Archons and their warriors. I'm also on Rockfin or Odyssey if crypto's your bag. If you need help with all these choices, just message me. I am always here to help, and I truly appreciate your help. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, here in the desert of the real. Hello and goodbye, as always.